Alex had always thought life was boring. Lately, though, everything changed when he met Veronica online, a woman who seemed to know exactly what he wanted before he did. At first, it was thrilling. Gifts arrived, messages buzzed constantly, and a golden necklace appeared at his doorstep, delicate and glowing in the moonlight. But excitement quickly turned to unease. From the moment he wore it, Alex began seeing shadows that weren't there before. Strange whispers filled his thoughts, and at night, when he closed his eyes, Veronica's smile wasn't warm, it was hollow, watching, waiting. He didn't realize it yet, but every gift, every message, every pulse of that necklace was a chain tightening around him. By the time Alex understood the truth, it was too late. Something had already claimed him, and somewhere in the dark Veronica was smiling, knowing that the next soul she wanted was already hers to take. I had always thought life was predictable. That was before I found her online. Her profile seemed like something out of a dream, polished pictures, lavish surroundings, a smile that promised care and attention. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to watch over me, maybe spoil me a little, make me feel noticed. I didn't expect it to turn into an obsession. At first it was exciting. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, each one warmer than the last, each one making me feel important, chosen, desired. Every little favor, every gift, seemed harmless. I told myself it was just attention, just a game, nothing more. The first gift arrived in a small, neatly wrapped box. I tore the paper carefully, almost reverently. Inside lay a necklace, delicate and golden, with a design so intricate it seemed alive. It smelled faintly of perfume, sweet and sharp at the same time, like it had been worn for decades. I slipped it on and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The chain felt heavier than it should, pressing lightly against my skin, almost as if it had a weight beyond its physical mass. She told me it was special, meant to keep me safe. I laughed softly to myself. Safe? From what? From whom I didn't know, and I didn't care. The first night I wore it, I had a dream that made me wake in a cold sweat. I was walking down a long dark corridor, the walls slick with some unknown wetness. At the end of the hall, I saw her, but her face wasn't the warm, smiling face from the pictures. It was a hollow mask, blackened eyes staring through me. She didn't speak, yet whispers filled my mind, a chorus of voices I couldn't understand. I tried to look away, but something compelled me to stare, and I felt a strange heat around my chest. When I woke, the necklace felt colder than metal should, as if the warmth from my body had been drained into it. Days passed, and her gifts became more frequent. Perfumes, designer clothes, cash, even little trinkets I didn't recognize but felt oddly important. I should have been grateful, but a creeping unease started to grow in my chest. I felt watched, even in my own room. Shadows moved where they shouldn't, and every time I glanced at the necklace, it seemed to glint knowingly, as if aware I was thinking about it. I told myself I was imagining things. My mind was playing tricks. It was just excitement, paranoia fueled by something thrilling and new. One night I awoke to a whisper, soft and calm, brushing against my ear. I froze. The words were hers, clear, deliberate. "You belong to me now." I sat up, heart racing, scanning my room. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, except me. Only the necklace gleamed in the moonlight, its golden surface darker, tinged with a reddish hue that shouldn't have been there. I reached for it, fingers trembling, and that's when I noticed the scratches. Tiny, crescent-shaped marks forming just beneath the chain, on my skin. They hadn't been there before. Panic surged, but I couldn't remove it. It felt fused to me, as if it had grown roots into my veins. Fear clawed at my mind, but I told myself to stay calm. It was just a necklace, a gift, nothing more. Still, when I closed my eyes, I could feel her presence, a shadow in the corner of my awareness, watching, waiting, patient. The more I tried to ignore it, the more intrusive it became. The necklace seemed to tighten when I moved, constricting like a living thing. My reflection in the mirror began to feel wrong. My eyes looked the same, but there was a strange glint, a subtle shift in expression I couldn't explain. Sometimes I swore I saw her standing behind me, just beyond the glass, smiling faintly. I'd spin around, my heart hammering, and find nothing. The room was empty, only the necklace remained, gleaming, pulsating softly, almost as if it were alive. I couldn't sleep without feeling her eyes, could barely breathe without sensing her close by. Every small sound made my body jump. The whispers in my dreams became louder, demanding attention, tugging at my thoughts. I didn't want to think about her, but I couldn't stop. The necklace had become a constant presence, a silent sentinel fused to my skin and my mind, and I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt it again. The weight on my chest, the almost imperceptible pulse around my neck, and the sense that someone was leaning close, breathing over me. My fingers grazed the necklace, and I realized with a shiver that the chain was no longer just cold metal. It felt alive, writhing softly, almost impatiently, as if waiting for me to surrender. And I had the terrifying certainty that I already had. I tried to distance myself from her, but it was impossible. Every time I thought I had escaped, every time I tried to ignore the messages or avoid her gifts, she found a way back into my life. The notifications started appearing at odd hours. Sometimes when I wasn't even using my phone, the screen lighting up with messages that I hadn't opened. I began to feel trapped, like the walls themselves were closing in, shrinking around me. The gifts she sent began to change, becoming stranger, more unsettling. The first one was a doll. At first it seemed innocent antique, with cracked porcelain skin and eyes that gleamed unnaturally in dim light. I placed it on the shelf, trying to convince myself it was just a toy, but every time I walked past I felt its gaze follow me. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was being paranoid. At night, I would wake to find it in a different position than I remembered. Sitting closer to my bed, its cracked smile just barely visible in the moonlight. Then came the music box. It was small and delicate, made of dark wood, with carvings I didn't recognize. I wound it, and a lullaby played a slow, haunting melody that I had never heard before. It wasn't beautiful. It was demanding. It lingered in my mind long after it stopped, echoing in corners of my consciousness that I didn't know existed. Sometimes, when I tried to sleep, I could hear it playing faintly, even though the music box sat closed on my dresser. The shadows grew worse. At first I thought they were tricks of the light, the way the street lamp outside cast patterns through my blinds, but I began to notice them moving independently, lingering longer than they should, stretching across walls, creeping toward me while I was asleep. I could sense her presence in them, a shape just beyond clarity, waiting, watching, never leaving. I stopped leaving the apartment. Every time I tried, I would get lost in streets that I thought I knew. The city seemed to twist, the paths bending back to my door, as if the world itself conspired to keep me inside. I noticed bruises on my arms, faint crescent marks forming without explanation. The necklace pulsed whenever I looked at them, as if responding to some unspoken command. Sleep became unbearable. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the corridor, but it had changed. The walls were lined with mirrors now, reflecting dozens of faces, all screaming silently, all watching me as I ran. She was always at the end of it, the hollow-eyed shadow, smiling as if pleased by my fear. I could feel her in my mind, whispering suggestions that I couldn't resist. I began to do things I didn't want to do, walk toward places I didn't recognize, sit in rooms I didn't intend to enter, obeying some invisible pull I could neither see nor fight. One night I woke to find her hands on my shoulders. I couldn't move. I tried to scream, but no sound came. The pressure wasn't heavy, it was subtle, controlling, claiming me in a way that made my own body feel foreign. The necklace glowed faintly in the dark, curling slightly around my collarbone, like a living thing that responded to her touch. I could feel her presence flowing through the metal into my skin, into my bones, and I realized with a chill that I was no longer entirely myself. Photos began appearing on my phone, images of me sleeping, eating, even staring at the wall, all taken without my knowledge. In every single one, her shadow lingered, faint but unmistakable, always just beyond me. Sometimes I would see her in reflections, standing behind me in windows or mirrors, smiling in a way that was almost gentle but filled with menace. I started avoiding mirrors entirely, but I couldn't avoid her eyes. They were everywhere, in every reflective surface, every shiny object, every dark corner. I stopped talking to friends. I stopped answering calls. My life shrank into a single obsession, the necklace and the presence attached to it. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that it was just stress, just paranoia. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I could feel her inhabiting my mind, waiting patiently, watching me slip further away from reality. And then came the first clear voice. Not a whisper this time, not distant or disguised. It was in my head, but unmistakably hers, clear and sharp. You belong to me. I didn't need to hear it to understand the meaning. The bruises, the marks, the gifts, the shadows, the pulsing weight around my neck, it was all a claim, a warning, and I had already crossed the line. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the necklace pulse against my skin. The shadows in the corners seemed to lean closer. I could hear the faintest hint of that lullaby from the music box, though it sat silent on my dresser, and I understood something terrible. This was no longer a game, no longer a fascination. It wasn't excitement or attention or protection. It was control. She had me, and for the first time I realized with cold certainty that I wasn't sure I would ever escape. I tried to fight it, tried to convince myself that I could take back control, but it was impossible. The presence had grown too strong. The necklace was no longer just around my neck, it felt like it had fused with my skin, my veins, my very bones. Every movement I made, every thought I had, seemed guided by something else, something that wasn't me. My reflection had changed, not drastically, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough that I could see it. My eyes seemed darker, wider, almost as if they were absorbing the light around me. Sometimes I swore I could see her inside them, smiling faintly, watching, pleased. I stopped leaving my apartment entirely. Even stepping into the hall to check my mailbox felt like crossing a line I couldn't undo. The city outside had become a distant memory, a place I no longer belonged to. I avoided mirrors, windows, even shiny surfaces. I didn't want to see her there. Didn't want to see myself becoming something I couldn't recognize, but she found me everywhere. I could feel her watching, always, in the shadows, in the pulsing weight around my neck, in the faint music that seemed to echo even when the music box was closed. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the corridor. It had expanded now, turned into a mansion that stretched endlessly in all directions. Every door I tried opened to another corridor, another room, each one filled with faces I didn't know, all frozen in silent expressions of fear, longing, despair. And there she was, walking among them, graceful and patient, always observing me. I tried to run, but the halls twisted, turned back on themselves, and no matter how far I ran, I ended up back at the same point, facing her hollow eyes. One night I felt her hands on my chest while I was lying in bed. It wasn't heavy pressure, but it was enough to paralyze me, to freeze every muscle in my body. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't scream, couldn't move. I could feel her presence inside me, filling my mind, my thoughts, leaving no corner untouched. When I finally managed to twist away, the hands were gone, but the necklace had shifted. It pressed tighter now, curling slightly, almost as if it were alive, reacting to her will. I realized then that this wasn't just possession. It was emerging. The bruises and scratches became more frequent, appearing without explanation. Tiny crescent marks on my arms, faint lines across my shoulders, small burns that looked like fingers had traced them into my skin. Every mark seemed intentional, deliberate, a record of her control over me. I tried to hide them, cover them, even scrub them off, but they never went away. The necklace pulsed whenever I touched them, a faint vibration that ran through my body like electricity. I had no doubt that she was using it to connect, to remind me, to warn me that there was no escape. Photos started appearing on my phone, each one taken without my knowledge. Some showed me sleeping, others walking through my apartment, sitting at my desk staring blankly at the wall. And in every single one there was a shadow just behind me, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't exactly her, but it carried the same sense of presence, the same control, the same quiet threat. I couldn't look away. Even when I tried to delete the images, they returned, each one more disturbing than the last. The whispers in my mind were louder now. Not just her voice, but dozens of others, low and persistent, pressing into my thoughts. They weren't words exactly. More suggestions, impulses I couldn't resist. Sometimes I would find myself doing things I didn't remember planning, opening doors in the middle of the night, walking to parts of the apartment I'd never explored, staring at objects I didn't recognize, all while feeling her close, approving, patient. And then I realized something horrifying. The gifts, the bruises, the marks, the shadows, the whispers, they weren't just tools to control me. They were preparing me for something I didn't want to understand, preparing me to join her, to become part of her world in a way that left no room for me at all. The corridor in my dreams had expanded further, now filled with bodies wearing masks, all moving slowly toward her, all obedient, all silent. And in the center of it, waiting patiently, was my own reflection, smiling back at me as if it already knew its fate. The fear became unbearable. I stopped trying to resist. I couldn't. The necklace throbbed against my skin constantly, pulsing in tune with some unknown rhythm, some heartbeat that was not mine. I could feel her in my thoughts, shaping my memories, whispering commands I couldn't ignore. I began to understand that I was no longer just under her control. I was becoming a vessel, a shell, a part of something that would outlast me, survive me, consume me completely. And the most terrifying part was that I wasn't even angry anymore. I was resigned. The last thing I felt before drifting into a restless, shadow-filled sleep was her presence pressing closer, merging with me, and the quiet, unmistakable certainty that the person I used to be was slipping away. Days had blurred into nights so completely that I no longer knew if I had slept, or if what I thought were nights were just the endless hours of her presence pressing in. Time had become meaningless. I stopped leaving my apartment altogether. The streets outside might as well have been another world, a world I no longer belonged to. Even standing by the window, staring at the city lights, felt wrong. They seemed distant, fading, as though the world itself had begun to fold away from me. My life had contracted into a single point: the necklace, her presence, and the suffocating knowledge that I was losing myself. The shadows had grown worse. They weren't just corners of darkness anymore. They moved with purpose. I would wake in the middle of the night and find them leaning closer, spreading across the walls like black water, pressing toward me, filling my vision. Sometimes I could feel something brushing against my skin, soft, deliberate, almost intimate, and I knew it wasn't a hallucination. The necklace pulsed in response, warm and insistent, as if signaling her arrival. One evening, as I was sitting on the floor, trying to keep my thoughts in order, I found a photograph tucked beneath the mattress. I hadn't put it there, and I didn't recognize it at first. My eyes widened in horror. It was me, but older, my hair gray, my skin stretched tight over my bones, my eyes hollow, and beside me in the photograph was her, smiling that same eternal smile, her hand resting possessively on my shoulder. I dropped the photo. It landed face down, but I could feel it burning into my skin, like an imprint I couldn't erase. I didn't want to look at it again, but my eyes kept returning to it. drawn as if by some invisible thread. I tried to remove the necklace. Fire, hammer, water, I used everything I could think of. Nothing worked. It remained clasped to my skin, unyielding, unbroken, pulsing with a rhythm that was not my own. The metal seemed to shift slightly when I touched it, curling like a snake ready to strike. Panic clawed at me, and I realized something I didn't want to admit. She was no longer outside me. She was inside me. Every thought, every breath, every heartbeat was her doing. She had become more than a presence. She had become a part of me. Then I noticed the inscriptions. Tiny letters carved into the back of the necklace. So small I hadn't seen them before. They formed words in a language I didn't understand. But when I touched them, I heard her voice clearly for the first time, not a whisper, not distant, but sharp, clear, unmistakable. You were mine before you were born. The words burned through my mind, leaving an ache that was both terrifying and intimate. I realized with a chill that this wasn't about control. This was destiny. She had planned this from the very beginning. My thoughts became harder to follow, harder to separate from hers. I tried to remember who I had been before all of this, but it was like recalling a dream I had already forgotten. My memories felt borrowed from someone who had lived a life I no longer had access to, and the more I struggled, the stronger her presence became. It was patient, precise, and merciless. She didn't just want control, she wanted assimilation, a complete erasure of my identity. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt her beside me, not just as presence, but as form, a shadowed figure, shapeless, yet intimately familiar, leaning over me. I could feel the cold of her touch, the deliberate weight of her hands pressing down, not heavy, but unyielding. My own heartbeat felt foreign, like it was beating in rhythm with hers rather than mine. And in that moment I understood something I had never admitted before. I was already halfway gone. Fear clawed at me, but it was accompanied by another feeling, an unsettling mix of dread and inevitability. I realized that nothing I did could stop her. She had prepared this, planned it, orchestrated it from the very beginning. Every gift, every mark, every whispered word had led to this moment. The music box played faintly in the corner, though it hadn't been wound. The shadows leaned closer, waiting, and the necklace pulsed with warmth and menace, as if it knew the next step I was supposed to take. I wanted to resist, but resistance felt meaningless. The city, the world outside, my own body, everything belonged to her now. And when I glanced into the darkened mirror across the room, I saw not just my own hollow reflection, but glimpses of others, faint and trapped behind the glass, all waiting, all lost. And then I realized the most terrifying truth. I wasn't just being controlled, I was being prepared. Prepared for something I couldn't yet understand, something far worse than fear. She was waiting for me to complete the final step. The last thing I felt before drifting into a restless, half-conscious sleep was the pulse of the necklace, steady, unyielding, and the faint, unmistakable pressure of her hand on my chest, reminding me that the moment was coming when there would be no me left at all. I can't tell how long this has been happening. Days, nights, weeks, they all blend together into an endless blur of shadows, whispers, and the constant pulse of the necklace. Time has lost all meaning. My body moves, eats, breathes, but it feels like a borrowed vessel, a shell guided by something that isn't me. The apartment is empty, silent except for the faint hum of her presence. I don't call friends anymore. I don't answer messages. I don't leave the room. There's no point. The world outside might as well have ceased to exist. I can feel her fully now. Not just near me, not just in my thoughts, but inside me, intertwined with my very being. Every movement I make, every thought I try to claim as my own, she inhabits it first. The necklace is no longer around. My neck, it has become part of my skin, part of my bones, a living connection that channels her will directly into me. Sometimes, I catch glimpses of my reflection and I don't recognize myself. My eyes are darker, wider, more aware than I ever was, and behind them sometimes I see her smile. The gifts, the marks, the shadows, the whispers, they weren't just about control. They were preparation. They were lessons. Every bruise, every scratch, every faint, invisible scar etched onto my skin has been a step toward this moment. I am becoming something else, something that is no longer entirely me. She is rewriting me, shaping me, bending me to her will, and I can feel the last pieces of who I was slipping away. I've stopped trying to fight it. Resistance feels pointless now. I am both terrified and calm, in a twisted way. The fear that once made my heart pound has dulled, replaced by an understanding that I am part of something greater, something eternal. But it is a terror unlike any I have known, beautiful, cruel, consuming. She is patient, precise, and inexorable. She has been waiting for this, orchestrating it, guiding me toward this moment since before I was born. I see them now. Sometimes, in the dark corners of the room, in the reflective surfaces I can no longer avoid, I glimpse other figures, faces trapped behind glass, behind shadows, eyes wide with fear or resignation. They are like me, vessels she has claimed, slowly assimilated into her world, and I realize, with a chill, that I am next. I am one step away from joining them, one step away from becoming just another presence in her collection. The most terrifying part is that a small part of me is still aware, a part that remembers my life before all of this, a part that screams silently for help, for escape, for anything that might save me. But it's faint, distant, overwhelmed by the weight of her presence. I try to reach it, but it vanishes whenever I look directly, as if she is erasing it piece by piece, preparing me for the final transformation. And then, in the mirror, I see something else. Another face, not hers, not mine, but a shadow of someone alive, someone resisting. Or maybe it's me, or the part of me that hasn't been claimed yet. It stares back, eyes wide, pleading. I try to reach through, but the reflection ripples, distorts, and disappears. My heart pounds in a rhythm that isn't entirely my own, and I realize that the moment is coming when I will no longer be capable of returning. I can feel her preparing me now, shaping me for something permanent. The pulse of the necklace is insistent, urgent, and the shadows in the room press closer. I understand with certainty that the world I knew, the life I had, is gone. There is only her, only the merging, only the inevitability of what is about to happen. The last thought I have before the darkness swallows me completely is not fear, it's clarity. I am no longer just me. I am a vessel, I am a shadow, and yet, I still see that other face in the mirror. I do not know if it is real or a trick, a glimpse of what remains of myself, or a warning from someone trapped like me. The final sensation is her hand, cold, unyielding, claiming me entirely. The necklace pulses one last time, glowing brighter than I have ever seen. And then everything goes still. Silence, darkness, a presence that is infinite. And somewhere, in the deepest corner of my mind, I know one thing with absolute certainty. She is waiting. Waiting for the next soul, the next body, the next life to claim. And I am no longer sure which part of me will survive to see it. The apartment sits quiet now, empty to the world but alive in shadows. And if you were to look closely at the mirror, or notice the faint gleam on the nightstand, you might see a flicker of movement, a pair of eyes staring back, waiting.